North Korea is expected to send reinforcements to Russia's Kursk Oblast. First topic. Second, Lex Fridman. US podcaster Lex Fridman plans to visit Russia to interview Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. In the Blitz interview, British Army Lieutenant Colonel Glenn Grant, we will be discussing possibilities and likeliness of British peacemakers to keep peace in Ukraine and other things just as well. So, good afternoon, welcome. My name is Henry Keane and we are UATV English, an English-speaking Ukrainian state media in constant persuasion to deliver hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world, directly from Ukraine. North Korea is expected to send reinforcements to Russia's Kursk Oblast, mainly gun and missile artillery units, Ukraine's military intelligence chief Kirill Budanov says in an interview with Warzone magazine published. Pyongyang is also expected to send 150 short-range KN-23 ballistic missiles to Russia in 2025, in addition to the 148 already supplied in 2024, according to the spy chief. Moscow is further said to receive additional 170mm M1989 Koksan self-propelled artillery guns and M1991 240mm multiple launch rocket systems. Budanov notes, adding that North Korea provided 120 pieces of each of these systems in the past 3 months. The North Korean soldiers are expected to train their Russian counterparts on the supplied systems, he says. North Korea has shaped up to be Russia's key supporter in its war against Ukraine, providing extensive artillery, ammunition, missiles, and contingent of 12,000 troops who had joined Russia in assaults against the Ukrainian salient in Kursk Oblast. Kiev has said that North Korean troops have already suffered 4,000 casualties, though the number cannot be independently verified. Budanov did not provide further details on the number of North Korean reinforcements or the time frame of their arrival. The New York Times, however, reports that according to an undisclosed U.S. official, fresh Pyongyang troops could arrive within 2 months. Experts interviewed by Ukrainian media, the Kyiv Independent outlet, connected to North Korea's high casualty rates to a lack of experience with modern warfare, the so-called human wave tactics employed against entrenched Ukrainian positions, and the resolve of North Korean troops to avoid capture at any cost of their own lives, of course. Only 2 North Korean soldiers are so far in Ukrainian captivity since Pyongyang deployed its troops in Kursk Oblast last fall. Russia has ramped up its efforts to push Ukrainian forces out of their positions in Kursk Oblast, held since early August 2024. Yet, the Ukrainian army is still there. The region is expected to play a key role in any negotiations amid U.S. President Donald Trump's push for peace talks. U.S. podcaster Lex Fridman plans to visit Russia to interview Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, whom Fridman himself calls president. And he says that on January 22nd at Joe Rogan's podcast. With nearly 5 million subscribers on his YouTube channel, Fridman, born in Tajikistan and raised in Moscow, organized an interview with Zelensky that was published on January 5th as part of what he described as his small part in pushing for peace.
There's probably a lot to say about this war. I should say that I interviewed Volodymyr Zelensky, and I will be traveling to Russia to interview Vladimir Putin, and I'm aware of the risks. I accept the risks, and the goal of the mission is just to push for peace. Lex Fridman on the podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience.
800,000 Russians killed and severely wounded in this criminal adventure of an usurped dictator. That is how much Putin loves his country. Bucha and Mariupol in Ukraine burned and thousands of civilians murdered. That is how much Putin loves his country. 20,000 children deported from Ukraine to Russia, and ICC indicts Putin exactly for that. That is how much dictator Putin loves his country. And what is that even his country? Putin considers Ukraine his country just as well. In particular, and in general, talking about countries and all that preposterous version of love to his country that, as per Lex Fridman's, should allow anyone with enough firepower to instigate a war and invade a sovereign state just because they love their country. Tajikistan. It is where that little arrogant MIT professor in AI and robotics, just Google Lex Fridman, whose real original Russian name sounds like Alexei Fedotov, was born. So, Tajikistan is a beautiful mountainous country where Alexei Fedotov was born, but raised he was in Moscow. That means he never knew what Russia is, as the main secret of the Kremlin is Moscow is no Russia. Moscow is an absolutely modern Western city with westernized technologies all throughout it, and roads and internet and satellite GPS and German, American, Japanese and Chinese cars running its roads, and dollars and euro very, very much appreciated there on the markets, even or especially these days. But take a drive 50 kilometers away from the city and find real Russia, dear MIT professor Alexei Fedotov, aka Lex Fridman. Invite your interlocutor, dictator Putin, there, in the middle of nowhere, and ask him why the hell, after almost 3 decades of him in power in charge of Russia, of his beloved country's well-being, real Russia looks like that, even more medieval than before him. Why there are no roads, no proper internet, no proper medical care, you name it. Ask him, and yourself, Mr. Fedotov, why you prefer to live in the United States and have your MIT professorship in AI and robotics and not in Mother Russia, that is loved so hard by President Putin. Ask Putin why loving Russia equals hating Ukraine for him. Ask him how come, if NATO is a threat, Putin makes an effort to grow NATO even bigger, as immediately after he started his criminal war campaign, Finland and Sweden joined the alliance. Why is that? Ask him why Russia left isolated with only dictators like himself around Putin. Ask him how come that $300 billion, I say dollars, are held as Russian assets in the Western banks and not vice versa. Does that mean that no one ever trusted in rubles, not only outside Russia, but also within Russia, within all these oligarchic circles who manage these enormous funds? Give me a call, Professor Fedotov, aka Lex Fridman, and I will give you more questions to discuss with an international war criminal and a thug indicted by ICC, a Soviet usurped Tsar and a dictator whom you, Lex, call President. Glenn Grant, British Army Lieutenant Colonel, is with us tonight. Mr. Grant?
Lovely to be here. Thank you.
Indeed it is, isn't it? Mr. Grant, you traveled to Ukraine a lot, yes?
Yes.
So right, I know that. It wasn't a question, it was a statement actually. But so yeah, right. By now you must learn all the good and bad sides of Ukrainian military. And being military yourself, you properly see all the things. If I say that all outdated Soviet approach to commanding and drafting, just by the way, soldiers also, is plaguing Ukrainian armed forces, would you agree with me?
I would have to say yes at the top level. Not. I think once you get to at the brigade level, it's a lot different. Brigade and downwards, in many brigades.
So if we're talking about the top-notch army positions, how to get rid of that Soviet mind, also that Soviet is that the way of thinking? Is that what is that even? The people are fighting for Ukraine. It's an independent and sovereign country. Yet we see some Soviet approach. How come?
Well, because the education system hasn't changed, and the military education system is still outdated. I think that's the first thing. And at every level, the military education system is outdated. I mean, most countries have moved away from huge, long courses to much shorter, sharper courses where you don't just teach how to. Or you don't learn from all the books. You teach how to look at the books and how to pull information out, how to make decisions, and primarily about critical thinking, responsibility, taking responsibility, and even as many I've heard many generals say, constructive disobedience. And I think that
Constructive
that last one
disobedience.
is
Nicely
important.
put.
Constructive disobedience. In other words, knowing when you should not follow what the boss says because you know better, because you're actually down there. Now, one of the big problems with the Soviet system is that there is an assumption almost built into the human psyche that as people get more senior, they become more intelligent, more knowledgeable, and better at their job. Unfortunately, that is not the case, and wartime proves that time and time again
Hmm.
that many people that they to quote one of my bosses, Brigadier Ian Johnson, someone once said to him, "But this man is extremely experienced. He's got 30 years' experience in this job." And Ian looked at my colleague and said, "No, no, no. He's got 30 times 1 year's experience. He hasn't grown from the first year." And I think that this is also a problem: is that if you're not tested, retaught, retrained, to change levels, then you don't. I mean, when I worked in the Ministry of Defence and in Ukraine, there are colonels doing what sergeants and lieutenants and captains do in Britain and America, and so they don't grow. And if you overinflate the jobs, which has been one of the problems, in other words, you put a colonel into a captain's job, you do two things. First of all, the captain never grows because he doesn't get the job. So he doesn't get a job that tests him.
Obviously, right.
And secondly, the colonel doesn't grow because he's doing a captain's job. So you end up with generals who actually are trained to the level of major, maybe, captains and majors.
Yeah,
because the system.
Because the system was perfectly explained by Oscar Wilde when he said that the experience is merely our mistakes, what we call experience, but this is really, a burden of mistakes that we carry on and we give it to others and we call it a great experience. And here we go, people fighting for the survival and for the sovereignty, and yet the Soviet-minded people are commanding them.
Yes, and this is a problem because it's a serious problem because there's almost effectively two armies now. You've got the top level, which is the old former officers who were in the army when the war started, and you've now got society gradually pushing in from the bottom and climbing the ranks, and those two things are they're incompatible.
No, absolutely, we can see that.
Cases.
We can see that with these recent arrests of the generals and colonels that were in charge of Kharkiv defense, where there were no defense actually. Well.
No, there wasn't.
And the people were outraged. Civilians and people in military were outraged because there should be. Our Ukrainian army was absolutely capable of doing that. To get cemented into the ground, to dig down and just not let Russians pass.
But you see, you've got structural problems in the system. In Britain, defences are done by the army. They're not done by some civilian organization with a tractor. In other words, the army engineers. Now, the structure is so bad, it's only got a few military engineers in the structure because everybody keeps making more and more infantry battalions, which means that the structure itself, militarily, in engineering terms, grows more and more unbalanced.
Right.
So where a brigade should have an engineer battalion of its own, a defensive brigade I was in UK, it was a defensive brigade. It had 2 engineer battalions and 3 transport battalions to carry the mines and all the defensive works equipment. But the commander of the brigade, he cited where the defenses were going to be.
Well, that's the way it should be.
That's the way it should be. So if you're in battle and you're going to go backwards, then either the commander should go backwards, leave the deputy in charge, and he cites the next level back himself and gets it dug, or the deputy should go back and do it. But you don't leave it to the mayor of the town and the local building company who have no clue whatsoever what a trench should look like, how to build it, where to place it. so that it creates, fire zones and things like this.
Right.
They just put a slab of holes in the ground and say that's a trench work. Well, it's not. It's a hole in the ground,
Exactly. It's a pit in the
but no
ground.
more and no less.
Maybe a grave for hundreds of
And
soldiers.
maybe a grave in many
Right.
cases. You're absolutely right.
Right. Okay. Well, let's slide to another questions. I would love to talk about more, but at least let's put some hope into Ukrainian army. Hope that the system is changing, because there are a lot of changing that society is going through, and military also is changing. So there are a whole lot of changes that Ukraine is going through right now. Hard changes, if you ask me. And Zelensky. The next question. Zelensky recently commented on those 200,000 probable peacekeepers, and says the figure depends on Ukrainian, the size of Ukrainian army, whatever that means. But my question is, talking specifically, British peacekeepers in Ukraine, what is even the likelihood of that?
Uh, unless Russia actually withdraws to its own borders, I think pretty much zero, because on the from the Russian perspective, it's not going to happen. That is exactly what they've been talking about. NATO moving into to Ukraine and being on next to Russian soil. So Russia is going to say this is actually a provocation. And anyway, I think it's stupid. There's not going to be a peace. We didn't have one. We didn't have a peace for Minsk. We didn't have a peace when Zelensky was trying to create around the old Donetsk line. We never got one there, and he tried loads of times. So there's not going to be one this time, I'm sure.
Yeah, me too. That makes two of us. But more a question that actually bothers me: other national peacekeepers. Let's speculate. They are here in Ukraine. What happens if Russian missile kills one of them, or two of them, or 10 of them? Who and how should respond to that? Will be there any response from NATO or from anybody?
Well, yeah. I mean, if they're there officially, and peacekeepers are killed, the way things are going at the moment, I don't think anybody would do anything. I think they'd just say, "Oh dear, dear, dear me," wring our hands, because I haven't seen any sign of political courage from the West, except probably, Kaja Kallas from Estonia, and the Lithuanian foreign minister. But so I just don't see that anybody would do anything. But I do not see at the moment that there is any chance that these countries are going to deploy peacekeepers if there is the slightest chance that the war will break out again. Because the moment that happens, then we are in a different level of war. And they know that. So I don't think they'll do it.
There's an answer. What choice do I have? I'm in. And the number 5 and last question. Here comes a quote. "We can do it the easy way or the hard way," Donald Trump says to Russia on ending the war in Ukraine. Do you believe, Mr. Grant, he's capable of exactly that? I mean, the hard way. I'm not asking what the hard way will be, but that would be the hard way, knowing Trump. So do you think he's capable of that? He will do that if there is no other choice left.
I mean, the one thing about Trump is his unpredictability.
Right.
And I think that is arguably his greatest strength. And if he feels that he's being played by Putin, or that Putin doesn't take him seriously, then we could see a completely different Trump from the words that he's been espousing for the last month or so.
I think
when you look back.
Right. Well,
we already have.
When you look
back.
Exactly. We're already witnessing the change. The changing. It's the shape is shifting.
Right. Yeah, it is. And I mean, the 24 hours moving to 6 months, moving to whatever else it's going to be. Right. The reality is setting in. So I think that we will see something different. And I mean, America has got the air power, frankly, that it could take out the whole of the front line, the whole of the Russian front line before breakfast one morning if they wanted to. Enough to allow Ukrainians just to walk forward. People don't realize the sheer scope and scale of NATO air power, which is absolutely huge. I mean, even you just put Sweden and Finland together and ask them to do damage, it would be huge.
Well,
so
don't
why
get me
don't they
wrong.
do it?
I agree. I agree with you, sir. Absolutely. But I mean, Sweden and Finland, we know, but sometimes, well, dictators are looking at dictators. So dictators of the world looking at Vladimir Putin, and what do they see? They see that the Western world prefers negotiate about the terms of freedom and safety than actually fighting for it. Am I wrong or not?
No, I don't think you are wrong. I think that most of the the Western politicians who are willing to fight in many cases are not in power,
Hmm.
and I think also that the West just doesn't feel that Putin has done enough yet to actually to
Hmm.
force them over the red line, and you could argue that he hasn't, because if you look at the West, it's still, everything's still comfortable. People still going skiing. People
Right.
still, doing their stuff. But this is almost certainly Putin's desire for it to be like that. In other
Absolutely.
words, to
I
mess
agree.
people about, but not to cross the red line, so that the West has to actually to do something. And he's doing that quite successfully. Done it successfully
Hmm.
for since the major
Absolutely.
invasion.
Those thin red lines. Thank you so very much, Mr. Grant. Again, it was a great pleasure to talk to you. I hope it will happen
Um,
again very soon.
Yeah, and I finish as usual. We are going to win, and the boys at the front line are doing an unbelievably phenomenal job,
Yeah, absolutely.
whatever they may arrest for generals. But so I just hope that they keep they stay safe as much as possible. Slava Ukraina.
Heroim Slava. Amen to that, sir. Thank you so very much. Well, that will be all for today and tonight. Thank you so very much for your precious time with us. My name is still Henrikin, and still we are UATV English and English-speaking Ukrainian state media doing our best to deliver hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. So please like, share, and comment. We want to know how we are doing. Your voice matters as it helps Ukrainian voice to be heard globally. So stay safe. We're also trying to do so, and tune for more already tomorrow. Goodbye.